Hi there, in this episode we're going to explore how you can build a KPI card, switching between different visual styles without using any bookmarks. This will be quite a lengthy exercise, so that's why I've split it into different videos, each focusing on a specific technique on building this KPI visual. And for each episode, there will be a starter file that allows you to follow along, and there will also be a solution file that you can download and then see how everything was built. So without further ado, we're going to start with the first part, and that is building the functionality to switch between the different visual styles. This is our starting point. I already created a basic canvas with the outline of our KPI card in there. So I added the shape, rectangle shape with rounded corners, and here we will build our KPI card. Then in terms of our data model, we have two tables. So we have our fact inventory table that is containing a history of the inventory levels per product. And then I have a dimension date table that is our calendar table. Then I already added a holding place for our measures. So these are KPI card measures. And then here we will add the measures, and that will then turn into a measure table. What is the first thing that we need to create? That is a slicer that allows us to toggle between the different visual modes. And to do that, we're going to use a disconnected table. A disconnected table is a bit of a helper table that we use to create certain functionality within Power BI, but it's not related to our actual data model. To create a new disconnected table, we're going to go here on the home ribbon to enter data. We'll call it the table KPI. I'm going to add two columns in there. The first one I'm also going to call KPI. And then there were 4 different KPIs that we want to add. So first KPI, second, fourth. And then I'm also going to store a KPI title. Call it column KPI title. Our first KPI is the total stock value. Then we have our excess stock. The third visual that we are creating is about stockouts. Then we have stockouts, and then the last one is days inventory on hand. This is our KPI table. So we have 4 KPIs and then 4 titles for each KPI, just describing what it is. I'm going to click on load. So we have our disconnected table that's now loaded with the KPI and the KPI title. Then we're going to add a tile slicer. Let's click on tile slicer, position it here on the bottom. And then we're going to add our KPI in here. So not the KPI title, but the KPI itself. Make it a little bit bigger. And now we can see I have my 4 KPIs in there. Now that we have our tile slicer added and we added our KPI dimension in there, we need to tweak the layout so that it becomes this pill-like switcher of the different KPIs. We're going to start by, first of all, removing the title and the header icons. We don't need those. We're going to go to Visual. Slicer settings, we're going to make sure that it's a single select and then force selection so that there is always one KPI that is being selected and that will render a visual. Then in terms of the shape, it's the rounded rectangle that we need. So a rounded rectangle, and I'm going to do a curvature of 5 pixels. Then we go to layout. Arrangement will be a single row. And we know that we have 4 KPIs. So we're going to say max buttons shown is 4. We can keep the spacing on 8 pixels. That's perfectly fine. I don't want to show the value of the actual KPIs. I just want to have like a minimalistic switcher of the different KPIs. So the callout values we're going to open, and then values we're going to disable. And we're going to make it a bit smaller, and then you can see we're already getting quite close to the type of layout or the design that we want to achieve. Let's put it in the middle on the bottom, like this. And then I'm gonna make some final tweaks to the color scheme. Gonna go here to the buttons. The default state we're gonna select. Then the border I'm going to remove. Then you can see I cannot see the buttons anymore, so we need to update the fill. And then in terms of fill, I'm gonna pick the white 10% darker. If I hover over them, I still can see the difference. So that's a very minimalistic black and grayscale layout, what I want to have. Now we have our KPI slicer that's being created. If we want to validate if everything is working, I can add a card in our report canvas, and then I'm going to add the KPI title. And then you can see if you toggle over the different KPIs, our title is updating. So we can see that that selection is working. Let's remove that KPI card again, we don't need it. And we're going to start building the actual visual in there. And in terms of visual, I have some visuals that were with a line, some with a bar. So the one that I picked here was the line and stacked column chart, because there we can pick between the two different types of visualization, so both lines and bars. Line and stacked bar chart. Let's add it to our canvas. Align it in the middle. And now it's time to start creating some measures. So the first one was the total stock value. We go here to my inventory. I have my on-hand value. So let's create a measure that will just sum the on-hand value. Right click, my KPI card measures, and create that first measure. So it's going to be sum on-hand value. I'm going to call this one KPI cards. I will visualize it as a line, so line, and then total stock is the name of my measure, and that's then the sum of the on-hand value. Now that I have my first measure created, I'm going to remove the column from my data model and turn it into an actual measure table. Let's add this one to our visual. Then we also need to have our date axis. From my dimension date table, I'm going to add my date key. And then I can see I'm looking at the total inventory value over time. It's currently displayed as a bar chart. So rather than having it here on the column y-axis, I'm going to drag it to the line y-axis. Can see it being visualized because it will be a KPI card. That's actually a type of visual where I like to apply some smoothing because that's just visually a little bit more appealing in my opinion. So let's go here to the interpolation type. Instead of linear, I'm going to go to smooth. Now we have our total stock that's being added. But of course, if I switch between those different KPIs, nothing is really happening in our visual. So we need to make this dynamic. And how we can do this is by going back to our measure. And rather than just saying it's the sum of the on-hand value, I'm going to wrap it into a switch function. What I'll do here is I'm going to look at what is my selected value of my KPI. Selected value KPI. And if my KPI is KPI 1, then I want to return the sum of my on-hand value. So this measure now is going to return the sum of the on-hand value if KPI is equal to 1, otherwise there will be no value. That's now saved, and if we toggle between the different KPIs, I can see it's only visible when I have my first one selected, and it's not visible with the other ones. Then we're gonna go to the second visualization that we had, and that was displaying my total stock versus my optimal stock. So it's the excess stock. So let's go back here as a refresher. And here we can see I actually have two types of lines. So I have my total stock value, which is the same as I have in my first visualization. And then I also have my optimal stock level. So I have two lines, and then I have some marking in between. So let's start working on the optimal stock level first. I'm going to create a new measure. I'll call this one KPI cards, also a line optimal stock is equal to, and then I'm gonna use the same type of logic. So I'm gonna use the switch function again. I'm gonna look for the selected value of my KPI. And then if my KPI is KPI 2, if my value is KPI 2, then I want to return the sum of the optimal inventory value. Select our visual, and then we're going to add this second line also to our line y-axis. And then if I switch between the different KPIs, I see my optimal stock in the second KPI, not in number 3 and 4, and I have my total here. Then here for the second visualization, I also want to show my total stock. So let's go back to the measure of total stock. And then we're going to also here say it's not only when it's KPI 1 that I want to return the sum, but it's also when I have KPI 2. And now I have my two lines on my second visualization. Let's already start by tidying up our visual a little bit. I'm gonna start by removing the legend. I don't need it. So let's select the visual, go to legend. On the y-axis, I'm gonna remove the title, and on the x-axis, so y and x-axis the same, so both remove the title. Now we're gonna get started on visual number 3. So the third KPI that we want to visualize is the stock out. So stock out is a day where I have a product that's not in stock, so I cannot sell it, and that's something that we want to prevent. Let's create a third measure, and this third measure is gonna be a bar chart. I'm gonna call it KPI cards bar, and then stock out. Use my switch function again, look for the selected value of the KPI. And then if it's KPI 3, then I want to return the sum of has stock out, like so. This is our third measure. Let's select our visual, and then we're gonna add our KPI card bar stock out to the column y-axis. And then I have a bar chart here. If I switch between them, I start with lines first, and then I get my bar chart. And then the last one that we have, let's go back to remind us how it looks like. This is a lollipop like chart that is gonna display the average days stock on hand. For this part of the exercise, I'm just gonna visualize it as a regular bar, and then later on in one of the other episodes, we will look into it and further fine tune it and turn it into an actual lollipop chart. Let's create measure number 4. Call this one KPI cards bar days stock on hand. Yes. use our switch function again, look for the selected value of the KPI. Then if it's KPI 4 in this instance, then we're gonna do the average of days in stock. Yes, perfect. So that's measure number 4. Select our main visual again, and then at our fourth measure also to the column y-axis. Now I have my 4 different types of visuals. Let's apply some coloring as well. I'm gonna go for a very minimalistic, just a black and white or grayscale like layout. So here I go into the visual and then go, so select it and then go to lines, select my first series that I'm gonna put the color to a full black. And then my optimal stock, I'm gonna put in a gray, so a mid gray, something like this, yes. And I'm gonna go to my bars, so let's switch in terms of KPI. And then here, once we have the visual selected, go to columns, KPI card to the bar stock out, put it to black, and then also here, this last one to black. This is starting to resemble the visualization that we wanted to create. Let's do some further optimizations. I'm also going to remove the grid lines, both the horizontal and the vertical grid lines. In the KPI card, I like to take out as many visual elements as possible and just make it a very minimalistic look and feel. And then the final part of this exercise will be to make the title of the chart dynamic, because right now if we switch between the different KPIs, nothing is really changing and telling us which data is being visualized. Let's select our main visual, go to the formatting, and then under general I have my title. I can update my text here, but that's static text. I want to make it dynamic. Then I can click on the conditional formatting, field value, and then we're gonna go here to our KPI table and then select the KPI title. So that's the title that we have added to our disconnected table. It's the first one, that's fine. Click on OK. And then now if we switch between the different KPIs, I can see that the title of my chart is being updated. Let's make it a little bit bigger. Let's put it on 24 points. And then I'm also going to change the font to Segu UI Bold. Now we have built the basics of our KPI card. We can switch between different visual styles. In the next episode, we're going to explore how you can also create a switcher to dynamically change the time horizon applied on the visuals. If you want to know how that one was built, click the link above and I will see you in the next one.